your time, 7 o'clock, and I want to start on time. And also, there are because there are wonderful things happening in the Jewish community tonight. There is a wonderful program, a Valley Beit Midrash program at Temple High on Jewish spirituality. This is not that. So there are people that came in, and so, it's understandable. So I just don't want you sitting here going, Mohammed, where's the spirituality in this?
I can speak about Jewish spirituality, believe me.
But welcome to everyone. So just a quick story how this constellation of people are here this morning. Before I went to Israel in March as part of my sabbatical, I actually met with Jerry Hirsch, a member of the Jewish community in Phoenix. And Jerry plugged me into a network, an Alliance for Middle East Peace. And quickly, I had entree to a number of organizations that fit my mission for going over to Israel. Organizations that were modeling collaboration for peoples otherwise in conflict. I knew they were out there, and in Givat Haviva was one of them, and I'll let Mohammed talk about that in a moment. And then about 2 months ago, my friend Bjorn Krondorfer, am I doing okay with that name? Who has been at Temple Solel, actually, as I thought I just saw Dev Rashford come in. Bjorn was here to participate in the Arava Institute meeting that we hosted at the end of August. And Bjorn then, about a month later, said, John, I've got a wonderful leader, Mohammed Darwashi from Givat Haviva, that we're going to have him at Northern Arizona University. Maybe on the heels of that, you can bring him to Temple Solel. And I said, well, Bjorn, I actually met Mohammed just a few months before you had asked. So sometimes it is beautiful when the stars align, as they have tonight. And I'm going to give Bjorn the honor of introducing our guest tonight. And it's a blessing for us just to be able to be sitting next to one another, and our growing friendship and collaboration between you and the Martin Springer Institute in ASU. At NAU, part of the state system of wonderful universities in Arizona.
Thank you, Tony. It is a pleasure to be here tonight and to introduce to you Mohammed. We got to know or hear about him when our university president went to Israel with a tour of other U.S. university presidents to get a tour of Israel's history, Israel's society, and as part of that they met with your center, and our president came back and asked me as the director of the Martin Springer Institute whether there's any chance that we can help her to bring him to our campus, and we did this yesterday evening, and it went really well. We had 130 students and community members to attend. And for our students, it's really important to hear an international perspective and to hear a different perspective on questions that they may not have even asked yet. So for them to be exposed to such an eloquent speaker as Mohammed was really a blessing. You probably hear my accent. I'm from Germany, so we have an interesting panel here from an ex-German or someone born in Germany who's now a U.S. citizen, and Mohammed from Israel, and Rabbi Linda here. So it's almost like you couldn't make a joke out of this. Three of us go to a bar, and then what happens? Maybe reconciliation would be lovely. Just one word about the Martin Springer Institute. I see that many of you picked up our annual newsletter. We were founded by a Holocaust survivor, Doris Martin. She survived in Belgium in Poland, and her husband Val. They decided to give a small endowment to our university with a dual mission to look at the legacy and history of the Holocaust, and also look at what is happening today. That we don't divorce what was happening in the past from what is happening today, and today is really very widely example, obviously we have now Mohammed here speaking. Next week we have Bogdan Bialik from Poland to come to town. He will actually be working with the Arizona Jewish Historical Society, and they are showing his film, the documentary about him. Bogdan is a Polish Catholic memory activist who made sure that the pogrom in Kiev in 1946, where 42 Jewish people were killed after the Holocaust by a mob of Polish townspeople, gets commemorated. And so he's coming. We invited him from Poland, and like here, we asked the Historical Society, Jewish Historical Society, to co-sponsor the film down in this in Phoenix, in the valley, before he actually joins us at the NAU. And another example, and then we see the spectrum of things we do. In April, we're going to invite Hassan Hasanovich, who is a survivor from the Srebrenica massacre of Bosnian Muslim men, and he will speak as a survivor. He was 18 years old at the time, to our students about what that genocidal violence meant in part of Europe. Enough of this. Mohammed Darashi is the director of the Center of Equality and Shared Society in Givat Haviva. This particular center, which was founded by the Kibbutz Federation, is celebrating its 70th year in existence, so it's the 70th anniversary, so it's only fitting for you to be with us here tonight. I won't introduce the center at all because I can read you what the web page says, but we have him here to tell you what it really is about. But as a director, he is really on the forefront of trying to define and identify and envision what Jewish-Arab relations could be in Israel, what they have been, what they are, and where they can go. He's also a faculty member of the Shalom Hartman Institute in Jerusalem, and he's seen and praised and recognized as a leading expert on Jewish-Arab relations. He has presented in really amazing places, such as the European Parliament, the World Economic Forum, the NATO Defense Council, the Haaretz Conference, and Israel's Presidential Conference, and Northern Arizona University, and tonight Temple Solel. So, welcome. Here's my question for him. We have an interview format tonight, and my first question to Mohammed is to say a few words of what the center is about, what is its mission, and what are they doing, and specifically what we see doing as a director of the center.
Thank you very much. Erev Tov, Masa al Khair, good evening. The center actually was founded, as Bjorn said, 70 years ago, not dealing with Jewish-Arab relations at all. It was founded as the study center of the kibbutz movement to teach kibbutz members how to be kibbutznik. So it was basically teaching socialism and how to manage the shifts in the dining room and how to train the teachers in the schools and basically how to manage kibbutz life. That's what our center was created for. But as you know, most of the kibbutzim in Israel are in the periphery. They're not in the center. And their immediate neighbors are the Arab citizens. So the relationship between them and the neighboring Arab villages became an issue. What do we do with this? A second issue that was also obvious for the members of the kibbutzim was the issue of the Holocaust. So they founded in 1963 two centers. One is called Moreshet, which is the Center of the Study of the Holocaust, which mainly focuses on the role of youth with the Jewish youth in resistance for the Nazis in Germany. I mean, afterwards we were named Givat Haviva, the hill of Haviva. Who's Haviva? She was a Jewish woman that was parachuted behind Nazi lines to organize resistance against the Nazis. And she was captured and killed. Her bones were brought a few years later, and she's buried on Har Herzl in Jerusalem. And the name, basically the whole issue was about resistance for racism, for radicalism, and these type of things. But as I said, in 1963, two things happened. One, the Israeli government decided to end the military administration that was imposed on all Arab Palestinian towns that remained part of Israel, which basically was, I would say, kosher stamping Arab citizenship in Israel. That was the stage when Israel realized that the Arab citizens are here to stay. They're not just a bargaining chip for population exchange. They lifted the military temporary status into civic status, of permanent civic status of Arab citizens. And our center was formed a week after that, realizing that if the Arab citizens are here to stay, then how do we manage that relationship? And the relationship started with actually a very naive approach. Let's go and meet with them. In America, you call it mother and apple pie. In Israel, we call it hummus coexistence. And the idea is to bring people for personal human interaction. We call it the humanization process. In academic terms, it's called the social contact theory. Bring people together to the same room for social interaction. It does the humanization process. The second thing that we added later was the language. How do we teach the Arab citizens Hebrew, and how do we study Arabic in order to be able to at least have basic communication? But slowly with time, we started realizing that that's not enough. It's not just about being nice to each other. It's also about being able to talk about the difficult issues, about narrative, about identity, and all those complicated issues that need to be put on the table. So we started with what we call the narrative debate theory, where you talk about the problems starting from what's happening today, and usually it ends with one mega conflict that we still have. Who did Abraham want to sacrifice? So I'm sure that you and I can engage in a 10-hour discussion. I will prove that it was Ishmael. You will prove it was Isaac.
I think it was Ishmael.
Well, I know it was Ishmael.
So to that, so I,
Bincha b'chorcha in the Torah.
Interested, Mohammed, your own personal story. I mean, how did you become involved?
Actually, I'm a product of this institution. In 1978, I was a high school student, 10th grade, and our teacher decided to bring us to Givat Haviva, and that's one of the major projects that we still run till today. We call it Face to Face. We bring Jewish and Arab kids together to the campus for a 3-day interaction. That's where that's where an Arab meets his first Jew. That's where a Jew meets his first Arab. And it was, I was 16 at the time, and that's where I met the first Jew. It was traumatic experience for me. I mean, it was fighting for 3 days, and then I didn't understand why it ended 3 days later. You develop an appetite for wanting to learn more, understand more, because it's like, it's like an onion. You start peeling it. There's one more peel and one more peel, and you start getting into the depth of it. The more you understand, the more you understand you do not really know where the issue starts or it ends. So I started with that, but I would say that it also reflects some kind of a path I took to myself. And I went to Muslim elementary school, I went to Catholic high school, and then I went to Hebrew University, and I send my kids to an Episcopal school now. And this concept of multiculturalism actually became part of my DNA. I would dare say that in this journey of learning about the others, I was also learning about myself. Because, we shared it over dinner, one of the most intriguing readings I do is the Rambam, a Jewish philosopher from who lived in Andalusia during the Muslim period of the golden ages of the Jews. And his journey was, what is Judaism in interaction with Islam? And then I started asking myself, what is my Palestinianism? What is my Arabism? What is my Islam in relationship with the surrounding Jewish population? And that led me to try to put together a dialogue group at the Hebrew University when I went to university. Already 1 hour into the meeting, it became a shouting match, and we never came back for a second meeting. So I thought, okay, we got the wrong Jews. So I went and looked for, looked for better Jews. And the meeting broke apart. And I thought, well, I had the wrong Arabs. And we tried 4 or 5 times this kind of dialogue program, and it failed. Then I went to Givat Haviv and asked, how do you do it? They said, you have to take a course, which is a year long, to become a facilitator. And that's really what put me in this road. This was more than 35 years, and I made it my life. My life has actually focused on 2 things. One is trying to not just understand Jewish-Arab relations, but put them on a path that would work, a path that would succeed. And in this path, I also discovered that it's not just about the relationship, it's also about me, myself, my capacity as an individual, my capacity as a collective, as a community, the 20% Arab community. What capacity do we need in order to engage in a proper discourse with the Jewish community? So it's not just to be able to come, it's what kind of homework I need to do separately, what I call uninationally, so we can have a binational discussion. So most of my life has been in these 2 parallel tracks: empowerment of my community, social, economic, and political also empowerment. It's not just about social and economic, but also political empowerment. And the second part is about how do we round this circle and make Jewish-Arab relations functional and operative, since we are now destined to live with each other.
Yeah. So, and Bjorn, you want the mic, just let me know. So I do want to just clarify one thing. You use the term binational. The binational, I think you're referring to, is that there are 20% of Israeli citizens are Arabs, as opposed to sometimes you'll hear the term binational as it relates to Palestinians and the state of Israel. Could there be a binational state with Palestinian state and a Jewish state, an Israeli state? I think those are 2 different things, but I just want to make sure that's clear, or I might not be correct.
Well, I think there are 2 separate issues. If we go back to the Oslo negotiations of 1990s, they pretty much determined what would a cross-border Israeli-Palestinian resolution to the conflict look like. And they said, more or less, a Palestinian state that would live in peace with Israel, more or less in the 1967 Green Line borders. The same agreements that were being formed, which have never been completed, completely disregarded the fact that Israel has 21% Arab population, which basically said to us, seek your destiny in Israel. So Israel, as the homeland of the Jewish people, is stuck with 21% Palestinian Arabs that did not immigrate to Israel. Israel immigrated to us. And the Arab citizens have one of 2 choices: either find a way to integrate and create an Israel that is hospitable to them, or find a way to immigrate and become refugees even in the Palestinian state. And we've seen all the Palestinians that immigrated or were forced out or whatever reason, we've seen what results this had on their life. And the choice of the Arab citizens was not to be part of this separation agreement between Israel and the Palestinians, but actually to remain part of the state of Israel in order to guarantee one thing, to guarantee the fact that we stay home. It's a simple, selfish reason. I live in a town called Iksal, just outside Nazareth. I'm 27th generation. My kids are 28th generation. And I want to guarantee that the 29th generation will have a place, safe and comfortable place for their prosperity. And in order to do that, I have to find the formula. If we talk about a divorce agreement with the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, we need to find the formula of a marriage agreement. That's integration between the Arab citizens, not the personal marriage, but the overall, what is Israeli identity that would be inclusive? How can Israeli identity evolve and mature to become an inclusive identity and not an exclusive identity? Most of you probably, when you think about Israeli identity, you think about the modern Jewish identity. It's not. Israeli identity includes me. And the question is, how do we make the Israeliness inclusive beyond the Jewishness of the state?
You often credit your grandfather of making the right choice by staying in Israel. Yesterday you talked about him as a farmer, but he's a very smart political man. What are the choices that you need to make in your generation for your children's and children's children's generation?
It's a good question. And, my father, as I said yesterday, he was a very smart man, mainly because he was practical. He was pragmatic. He was not a political scientist. He was a farmer. And, for him, what he wanted to buy is to live for another day and succeed and improve our life day by day. That was his pragmatism. My pragmatism today is a little bit more sophisticated, but it means two things. One is, how do we, do encourage, going back to your question, a resolution of the cross-border conflict. And I think that if we're able to create a good success story in Jewish-Arab relations in Israel, we will prove two things. One, the Jews would have proved that came to the Middle East to live in peace with the Arabs, i.e. an example of coexistence in home base in Israel. This will be Israel's best export to the Middle East, to show that the return of the Jews to the Holy Land did not come to control, oppress, discriminate, but to live in harmony, coexistence, and equality. So if we're able to do that, first of all, the Jews will benefit from it. The second is where I will benefit is, one, I will get to stay home. I will not become refugee. I will not be alien, not even in Arab countries. But second of all, I will be part of this prosperity and modernization. I mean, the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel has very clear promise, gave very clear promise to my grandfather. It said, stay, and you're guaranteed three things: social, economic, and political equality. And the legacy I want to leave to my kids is creating what I call islands of success in these arenas. How do we create, how do you spell it out? How do you practically take those concepts of social, economic, and political reality and make them policy on the ground, make them reality on the ground? So there are two themes that I would say are present. One is a debate about the identity of the state. You might have heard of a law that was passed last year called the Nation-State Law, which tries to say to me there is no debate. Israel is only the homeland of the Jewish people, full stop. It's not the homeland of the Arab citizens. Well, I challenge that debate because it's the only homeland I've known. I have 60, and my national identity is not a flag and it's not a political science definition. My national identity is the 64 olive trees I inherited from my great-grandparents, and each one of those 64 trees has a name after one of my ancestors. That's my homeland. My homeland is not a concept of political science. It's realistic, touch, feeling. I know if I fly home Friday, Saturday I'm picking my olives. And that's my connection. I don't want to lose that connection. Every Friday afternoon, after the Friday prayer, I go to visit the graveyard to greet my 26 ancestors that lived in the same village I live. I don't want to lose that. So I have an interest in finding this working formula with the Israeli Jewish public out of selfish self-interest. And I think the Jews have also their self-interest invested in this matter. So it is that. It's how to make it work. And we know we're not the first minority. Europe has tens of minorities. And many nations have invented this wheel of how to treat groups with some kind of collective rights and civil rights and human rights. So minorities there are ways and paths how to do that. Israel does not know yet how to do it on the constitutional aspect, but on what I call the horizontal, not the vertical, the horizontal aspect, we are able to create many, many successful stories and many, many successful projects that show that Jews and Arabs can, one, coexist, Second, have heated debates and agree to disagree. Coexistence doesn't mean that we have to agree on everything. Most Arab citizens still see 1948 as a disaster for them, while Jews see it as the rebirth and the rejoice of the Jewish people that will guarantee their eternal security. It's two different narratives. And we need to understand that we can agree to disagree, but the most important part is it's not the coexistence and not the dialogue. The most important part is the creation of mutual interests and interdependency.
So one of the islands of success, Mohammed, what is it? Just could you give us an example?
Okay. We inherited from the Turkish Ottoman Empire a segregated educational system. So when I shared with you this project, the face-to-face project, it is trying to break that segregation and give this one-time experience of being able to meet the other, which we know scientifically now, after measuring the results, it reduces racism rate dramatically. When Jewish kids come into our campus, 68% of them have racist views against Arabs, and 57% of the Arab kids have racist views against the Jews. When they walk out of our campus 3 days later, racism rate drops to somewhere around 10 to 12%. So there is a pill against racism, and that pill is interaction, dialogue, humanization, and also agreeing to disagree and being able to put this into context. But we feel, we bring about 10,000 kids a year. I would say that's almost 50% of the industry of dialogue in Israel. Almost 50% happens with us. And there are 67 other fantastic organizations that do the other 50% of the work, and we feel that they are our partners and complementary work. So I have nothing but praise to the other fellow organizations. But we feel that this reality of segregation has to be challenged in a faster mood. We can't, and I was part of a program, you showed me a picture outside, of hand-in-hand schools. Hand-in-hand schools, there are schools that try to break the segregated educational system. And I was one of the founders about 20 years ago, but I quickly left. Mainly because I felt we're doing the ultimate best program you can do. But the speed was not proper. In 20 years of existence, Hand in Hand created 6 jewels, 6 fantastic schools out of the 4,800 segregated schools in Israel. So if you do the math, so if you do one school in every 3.5 years, you probably need 19,000 years to finish the job. So we went for the second best. I mean, the hand-in-hand schools is modeled after the American concept of busing. Busing children to force integration in the school system. To talk about busing in Israel, they'll send you to mental health hospital. Or if they approve you, you'll be private, very expensive school, such as Hand-in-Hand. So what we said, my program was, okay, if we can't do the busing of the children, can we do busing of teachers? Jewish teachers in Arab schools and Arab teachers in Jewish schools. I started with this project in 2005 with 6 teachers. Today, this program is operating in 1,350 schools in Israel. 1,000 Jewish schools that have Arab teachers, and 350 Arab schools that have Jewish teachers. But that's not what you should clap for. What you should clap for is the result. After having a Jewish kid, after having an Arab teacher in their life, their racism rate drops from the average of 68% to the average of 10%. An Arab kid, after having a Jewish teacher in their life for 2 years, the racism rate also drops to somewhere around 10%. And it's even more important than the program that we do on our campus, because we do not have the problem of what we call the returning home syndrome. Another island of success, we're able to convince the Israeli Board of Higher Education that if you continue having obstacles in front of Arab students to enter Israeli universities, they will seek education somewhere else. And the somewhere else was going to Jordan, going to the Palestinian territories, and coming back with the degrees. People that want to study, and in our community, we feel education is the strongest mobility vehicle, and we need to invest a lot in education. So when Israel was creating obstacles, we went somewhere else, Eastern Europe, but we were able to show them two things. One is that those kids that go to study outside Israel, they go through a process of what we call de-Israelization. They lose their Hebrew. They become more radical, either religiously or nationally. And when they come back, they have a delay in entering the labor market, which could be up to 36 months in comparison to someone that graduates an Israeli university. What does that mean? It means that those people are on welfare payment for 36 months from the state because they're unemployed. So the state is losing money on them. And instead of working and generating taxes, instead of being in the income sheet of the state, they were on the expense sheet of the state. So actually our partner in this was the finance ministry okay, well, no brainer. If you can take someone and you, instead of paying him, he pays you, the Ministry of Finance realized that this is a good income source for the state, and they started challenging the Board of Higher Education. The success of this project has been dramatic. In 2003, when we started with this project, the percentage of Arab students in Israeli universities was 3.5%, while being 21% of the population. Today, 16 years later, we are 18% of the student population. And what's more important is that 2/3 of the students are female students, which means modernization comes with it. Result of it, it's putting a lot of Jews in some kind of a calmer mood because we were able to show that an Arab woman with a university degree and a job has less children than a Jewish woman with a university degree and a job. So those concerned about demography and the growth rate of Arab citizens, which was higher than the growth rate of the Jewish citizens, those concerned, all what they needed to do is be generous, put their hand in their pocket, and give a scholarship to that Arab woman. And she will deliver less babies and deliver more taxes. And it's all about finding those common interests into this process. By the way, the growth rate of the Arab community has dropped dramatically from almost 4.2% in 2003 to 3.1% today as a result mostly of female education, while in the Jewish community, the birth rate is 3.2%, higher than the birth rate of the Arab community because of improved educational systems in the country. It's basically look for mutual interests. That's the bottom line.
Can you, the divisions between Arab Israelis and Jewish Israelis goes to in various venues, from political, social, economic, educational, but it's also language. I mean, most, I think probably all Jewish Arab-Israeli population knows Hebrew, but most Jewish Israelis don't know Arabic. How is this an obstacle? What can be done about it? Is it a source of fear? Is it a source of misunderstandings? What can you tell us about it?
Well, I can speak for hours about this, mainly because my undergraduate degree was in English, and I studied Beowulf and Shakespeare, and that allows you to really enter the mindset of English speakers. It's not just to be able to communicate with them. You understand the value system which they're based on. And when I also studied Hebrew and improved my Hebrew, and especially also studying about Judaism from Jews and Christianity from Christians, when you understand the issues from the owner of those issues, you're able to go into their psyche and understand their psyche. By the way, if you're ever short of a rabbi for Shabbat service, I can also do it in perfect Hebrew. So
Now I should be worried.
no, we will not take these jobs, just assistants. But I served in 2009 on a commission commissioned by the Israeli Minister of Education, at the time, Yuli Tamir, we were tasked to come up with policy recommendations for education for shared society. And it was a group of us, about 15 people. We looked at some models, and we came with very clear, specific recommendations. One of them, the need for bilingualism, that all Jewish Israelis need to be bilingual, all Arab Israelis need to be bilingual, for not just the social part of it, but for additional components that we're able to find. For Jews in Israel to be able to speak Arabic, we found that it increases their sense of safety and security. And to convince the Minister of Education, once we got that data, we went to interview a few kids that studied Arabic. And one of the kids was from a town called Carmel in the north. We asked him, now that you know Arabic, tell us, what did it do for you? And his answer was very simple. He said, my mom told me that every time I get on the bus and I see Arab kids getting on the bus, I should dial 100, that's 911 in Israel, and have my finger on send, just in case they try to harm me. Imagine that kid. He has his finger on send, shaking, waiting for his stop to come. And he said, now that I understand Arabic, I drop ear, and I understand what they talk about. Once they were talking about a new bakery. Another time they were talking about a new movie that I haven't seen. And the third time they were talking about the short skirt of the girl in the second row. I looked, they realized I understood them. We looked at each other and we smiled. Now the difference between knowing the language is the difference between shaking on send and smiling, where you share an interesting, funny case. It contributes to your sense of security. So that's the need for Israeli Jews to understand Arabic, to be able to transfer them from hearing Arabic as the language of the enemy to realizing that the Arabic is the language of their fellow citizen. Not to mention that if you go to the shuk, to the market, you can get better prices if you bargain in Arabic, and you get probably better hummus plate with the specials from that restaurant. But it's more functional, that allows you to interact and socialize with your fellow citizens and not regard it as the language of the enemy. While for the Arab citizens, perfecting Hebrew has a completely different function. Perfecting Hebrew is a ladder for social, economic, employment, mobility. When I talked about those that go to study in Jordan or the West Bank, the key problem for them, they come as fantastic doctors. They come as fantastic with fabulous degrees. Where do they fail? In the interviews. In the interviews, their Hebrew level is very, very weak, and that does not allow them to get either accepted, and if they're accepted, their mobility in the workplace is very, very slow in comparison to those that studied in Israeli universities. So perfecting Hebrew is an economic mobility tool for Arab citizens. It's an academic mobility tool. It's a language. It's a functional language of the country. Add to this the fact that when I say to you, I can run a Shabbat dinner for you or a Shabbat service, it is a message for you that I've done my homework to get to know you. I've done my share in the citizenship structure, in the shared society structure, to stretch my hand towards you, to say, I understand you, I understand your ethos, the way the language was created, because language tells a cultural story. It doesn't come from zero, it comes from somewhere. And the fact that you make the effort to understand the other is the skill that is needed to live in a shared society. Now, once you know, it doesn't stop there. I mean, it's not enough to be able to understand the language, but we discovered that language has become a fascinating cross-sector tool. And in addition, I would say there's another skill that is needed. That is the skill of being able to go beyond just your own identity. The skill of trying to create wider cycles of identity. I know how to be Palestinian, I know how to be Arab, I know how to be Muslim, and most Israeli Jews know how to be Jewish, know how to be Mizrahi, know how to be Ashkenazi. They know how to function. The question is, do we know how to create a bigger cycle, which is called Israeli, that is an inclusive? And that is a skill we have not perfected yet. We don't know, we haven't done it yet. And if you go to, when we talk about the fact that Israeli universities today have 18% Arab students, it's a and my daughter graduated from Hebrew University. She's doing her master's in genetics at Tel Aviv University today. But the Hebrew University she went to is not the same Hebrew University I went to. When I was there, we were about 1.5% of the students, and we were hiding. We were trying to hide the mere fact that we are even there in order to avoid some kind of a mistreatment. We didn't want the professor to know that we are there. One, not to be asked and start mumbling in broken Hebrew, but also not to be identified as someone that he might discriminate against us, because we were afraid of his discrimination. But now, with the big mass of Arab students, the universities, there are two things. One is the capacity that was created in the Arab community is one thing. So that's part of the skills to live in a shared society. But then the universities had to create space. And creating space meant, for example, how do you test the intellect of Arab students? You have an exam in America called SATs, right? In Israel, we have something called psychometric exams. When I took the psychometric exam, I took it in Hebrew. How did I pass it? I don't know. Okay? I don't know. I'm not sure if I was smart at the time. I don't know if I'm smart today, but somehow I got in. But with time, we started examining this test. And we realized if you are able to translate this test to Arabic, examine the Hebrew level separately, have a separate exam for Hebrew, but to examine intellectual capacity to become a university student, if you take the exam in Arabic, you get 24% increase in your grade. So we went to universities and said, what do you want to measure? Intellectual capacity or Hebrew? Hebrew do a separate test, and we call it Ya'el, Yidi'at Ivrit L'Academia, knowledge of Hebrew for academia. If you are not good enough, you will not go to university. Then you have to take a course in Hebrew to improve your skills. And another test for intellectual capacity and skill. And that increased the percentage of Arab students who qualify for academic studies. It almost doubled the amount of qualified students to the universities. But the other thing in the space creation was, I would say, even a DNA change in the university once the percentage of Arab students was so significant. All Israeli universities today, during the month of Ramadan, the fasting month for Muslims, would allow Arab students not to take exams after 1 o'clock in the afternoon when they're fasting. Why? Because we're able to prove that if you take an exam while fasting after 1 o'clock, with your sugar level very low, with your water level very low, your grade is going to be affected by 27%. So if the job of the university is to test you at your best capacity, do it either in the morning or give a deferment date. And that reduced the dropout rate. I mean, that, among other things, reduced the dropout rate among Arab students from 50% in 2003. 50% of Arab students dropped in the first year, down to 12% today, that dropout. Why? Because you try to identify where's the weakness and find a solution for that weakness. They don't take different exams. It's the same exam. It's not give anyone a break with their intellectual capacity and intellectual output, but to see where the problems are and hold their hands for the temporary period so that once they get to second year, they're qualified to finish the second and third and fourth year.
So first of all, well, how's he doing? Just a little reality check, because I think he's doing great.
Thank you.
Before opening it up to Q&A, and my guess is there will be in Azra, I just make sure that I ask you a question, because as I'm listening to what what Mohammed is able to accomplish, to be able to really understand the faith and the culture of the other. I mean, it's what the Islamic Speakers Bureau of Arizona does. Because it's so timely, Mohammed, if you could maybe just 8 minutes, the third largest party in Israel right now, after the last election, is referred to, I believe, as the joint list. It's
Correct.
13 seats, the third largest party. How in the world can that be?
Hey, you couldn't ask a better question, but for that you need to stay overnight. Because, I have a 12:45 flight, so until my flight. I worked in the Knesset for a number of years. As I said, part of my work has been also in political mobility and political capacity. I was one of the founders of the Democratic Arab Party, which is one of the 4 components of the joint list. I was their elections campaign manager for a number of years, and I've been since 2000 leading what we call the Get Out the Vote campaign, which we did very well this year, increasing the turnout rate in the Arab community from 49% in April to 59% in September elections. If you give us another time, another elections, we'll probably raise it to 69% this time. So there is a feeling today in the Arab community that political engagement is the way to do it, not to sit on the side and curse the political results that produce governments that have not been favorable for integration and equality, but get engaged. And get engaged means 2 things. One is power, capacity building, increase your numbers in parliament. And second, send the right members of the Knesset. Members of the Knesset that are willing to bring results and not just go express our pain and our anger from the government. And this is pretty much the difference between between the April elections and the September elections. What got the joint list this increase?
What is the joint list?
It's a list of 4 Arab political parties that joined together for the first time. Actually, the second time, 2015, they did it. Then they broke apart. They got punished when they broke apart. The lowest turnout rate was in April, and when they came back, they were rewarded with an increased turnout rate. But this time they were rewarded not just because they joined forces together, but because the leader, Ayman Odeh, made a very clear expression. He said, our politics is going to be different politics. It's not going to be only expressing anger and pain and frustration. We want to be part of the future coalition in Israel, which is something that has never happened before. I mean, the closest we've been to that was during the Rabin government, where the Arab parties provided the safety net for the Rabin government, and it was a minority government, dependent on minority seats in the Knesset, but with the 5 Arab members of the Knesset at the time, he got the 61-seat majority to remain in power. And in 2000, and the last time that anyone discussed the issue of Arab parties being part of the coalition was in 1999, when Barak was elected to form a government. And since then, this option of Arab citizens becoming part of government got more and more delegitimized by more extreme right-wing parties in Israel. And this time, and in a way, we internalized, the Arab politicians internalized this position of eternal opposition. And the public started punishing them, said, if you want to be eternal opposition, we will vote less and less for you. And they figured out that the only way to increase turnout rate was by expressing practical language, practical approach towards policy, political engagement. So Ayman Odeh, the leader of the party, said that if elected, we want to be in a coalition with the center-left government in Israel. That got the masses out. In exchange, Benny Gantz, the leader of the Blue and White Party, said, if elected, I'm going to invite the Arab joint list to the negotiations table. He didn't commit that this will result with elections. I was lucky to be one of 4 people that drafted a document with 32 points of what would an agreement look like between the joint list and the blue and white party. We put this document on the negotiations table on last Thursday. The meeting did take place between Ayman Odeh and Benny Gantz Thursday last week at 3 p.m., 3 in the afternoon. On 28 of the points, there was complete agreement. On 4 points, they're having discussions about it. Whether this will yield with the Arab list joining the coalition or providing or being just a safety net or not is to be seen. But for now, we've legitimized the process of negotiations between the Arab parties and the mainstream center-left party in Israel. We have an agenda. There's 32 points. We know what we agree on, and we know the 4 points that still need to be reframed, rephrased, restructured. This is a big development. The last elections, the September elections, were elections that did re-legitimization of Arab political participation in Israel.
I mean, actually, a historic moment. I mean, really to have Mohammed talk about not only what's happening, but his own participation is, could be history making. So I'd like to just give an opportunity, and we've created the opportunity for questions and answers. So I'm just going to see our hands going up, and would appreciate if the question could be a question as opposed to a statement. Just that's the one thing I would ask. And also, you can introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Deborah Harris, and I have to say, after listening to you, this is the first time in many, many years that I have had any hope of resolution and peace in Israel with everyone who lives there. My question for you is, how possible is it for you in your current setup to divorce yourself from the surrounding countries that may or may not care whether you succeed and whether Palestinians and Israelis are Israelis? And how can you get yourself out of that vice? And I do want to say again, this is the first time in many, many years that I have any glimmer of hope that's there.
Well, first of all, the wider Arab world has made it easy for us as a result of the Arab Spring, so to speak. The disarray that the Arab world is going through means to us we have no one to count on to deal with our issues. As I said earlier, the Oslo agreements, if I read them in the eyes of an English language specialist, I studied English literature, I said, one of the things that our professor used to tell us, look for the power of omission. When you read a text, look for what did the author choose to omit. And what the Oslo negotiations omitted is any mention about the Arab citizens. Basically, the Palestinian leadership was saying to us, you're on your own. You're not, maybe you thought you're part of the conflict, but you're not part of the solution. Your destiny is forever going to be as Israeli citizens. Figure out how is this supposed to work. So at the beginning, it was confrontational about identity of the state, the Jewish state or the state of its citizens. It's either or. Today, people realize that it can be both. It can be the nation state of the Jewish people, as hopefully future Palestinian state will be the nation state for the Palestinian people. But today's reality also that there's no pure ethnic homeland for any nation around the world. So states are also the states of their citizens. And the functionality here becomes simple. Once you talk about something that once you define the problem, you can define the solution. So one end is that. The second part is also the Palestinian split since 2006 between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority has also made it easier for us. Because now we're not focusing on the Palestinian issue because the Palestinian leadership itself is split on this issue. Who are we to come and replace them in arguing that the Palestinian issue is the number one issue today. They're arguing about the Gaza Emirate versus the West Bank Emirate. And we don't want to be caught in this partisan politics within the Palestinian community. So we sort of park the national ethnic identity issues, put it in a parking mood, and focus on social economic issues about our future and our destiny and our status. So it doesn't mean it's easy, because in a way, now that we have to deal with the Israeli Jews and the constitutional issues. How does Israel mature to be not only the state of the Jews, but also the state of its citizens? This is bringing a lot of resistance from the right wing that wants the exclusive nature of the state. That's why they passed the nation-state law. But at the same time, we've proved successes. Hopefully you won't need us, but if you come to Israel and you need to be hospitalized, you'll find that 31% of the doctors in Israel in the hospitals are Arab. You'll find that 28% of the nurses are Arab. You'll find that 35% of the dentists are Arab. You'll find that 55% of the pharmacists are Arab. So Jews know how to use our services when they need us. So what did it mean? We have been able to build our medical capacity. The Jewish population had been able to expand its willingness and readiness to accept our role in that capacity. The mutual interest plays a role. So we've tasted the flavor of working together. So there is already some, although it's not that long of a history, that when we kicked in this mood of integration, it's only in the last 15 years, but we're beginning to show success stories which we can build on, such as the medical industry.
Welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Have you been able to identify common areas of interest with the more religious and observant communities within Israel?
Not all of them. The ultra-religious is completely closed community. The Haredi is completely closed. I mean, not only for the Arabs, but also for anyone else. With the national religious groups, the ones that live in Israel, we have no issues with them. The ones that live in the West Bank, they think of themselves as the pioneers for liberation of the land of Israel. With those, there's almost no language. They tend to see the Arab citizens more as the enemy and not as the fellow citizen. Most of them hardly recognize the concept of citizenship. They think of the nation state, not the civic nature of the state. Within the Arab community, only about 17% define themselves as Muslim first, and the remaining others put other sub-identities much more, give them more priority. So the religious factor for almost half of them is preventive factor. Those that come with political Islam, they don't want to engage in any of this dialogue, because for them, what they want is the creation of a Muslim state and not a Jewish-Arab dialogue, democracy, liberalism. That doesn't interest them at all. It's not about the Jewish aspect. It's all about the other aspects. But among the 4 components of the joint list, there is also the Islamic movement, which is the moderate wing of the Islamic movement. And they are they're the ones that said last week, we'd like to get ministerial positions in the cabinet. So not all Muslim, I would say half of those that identify themselves as the Muslim, as Islam is the main identity issue for them, half are not willing to engage at all, and the other half is willing to go all the way, as far as 100% integration. And actually they split over this issue. So I don't think religion is the main factor. And you know what? I would say if it's a problem, put those groups aside. Let's try to prove that the rest of the 70, 80% of the population is capable to create that shared space, and we'll deal with them later. Why get stuck now with dealing with the hardest cookies, as they say, while we can accumulate successes in areas that also they will benefit from it, and you'll accumulate success that they will see that this becomes the new norm. This becomes a new culture that is an inclusive culture. مساء الورد. اسمك؟ بوروس.
We'll talk in Arabic later. My question for you is about the integration of the Druze community and what models that offers for integration for the Arab-Israeli community and where things split. Just curious of what kind of models it does are applicable and what aren't.
Okay.
Who are the Druze?
Well, the Druze community is a sect of Islam. They constitute about 8% of the Arab population in Israel. They had an interesting arrangement in 1952. They basically split from the rest of the Arab community. And they have a concept that says, go with a standing wall. You know, whoever is in government, you align with them. You align with the powerful in any country because they're a small minority. And their policy, since they got recognized as a sect during the Fatimi regime in Egypt, their policy is always to stand with whoever is the powerful. Whatever regime there is, you align with them. It's a mindset of minorities, by the way. What they decided in 1952 is to have a unique relationship with the Jews over their relationship with the rest of the Arab world. They demanded to be identified as an ethnic national subgroup, which they were granted in Israel, which makes you think, what is nationalism? You know, Professor Yeshayahu Leibovich used to say, nationalism is when a group of people think of themselves as a nation, they are such. So no one can come and say you're not. And they thought of them, in Israel, they think of themselves as a nation. So let's give them that. They're that. In other countries in the Arab world, they do not think of themselves as a nation. They think of themselves as an Islamic sect. But the arrangement in 1952 is that they started serving in the Israeli military, only men, Druze men serving in the Israeli military, thinking and hoping this will help them into their Israelization process, which gave them a number of social and economic benefits over the years. But the testing point was the nation-state law. When the nation-state law was passed on 19th of July, which said that Israel is only the homeland of the Jewish people, the Druze staged the biggest demonstration. They said, well, what about us? We've been the most loyal. We've sacrificed hundreds of our sons and into wars in defending Israel. And now when you redefine Israel, you have a chance to redefine Israel, you neglect almost 70 years of service, and you possess Israel for Jews only. Which basically puts the question now, is military service the vehicle for legitimacy? Clearly not. Is military service the vehicle for social economic equality? Well, it gives them probably an edge over the Arab citizens, but definitely not bringing them towards equality with the rest of the Arab citizens. So in a way, you can take out from this, yes, it can help you a little bit in social economic equality, but it doesn't help you when you talk about political equality.
So Mike was here, and almost from year to year, you speak to them about this very long-standing problem that the entire world watches. And you've given us lots of rays of hope about statistics and how you've lowered intolerance by some of the measures that you take, and yet, as an observer, and I was in Israel in September, what I have seen over my life, from the 70s as a boy now to a middle-aged man, is an overall hardening. An overall hardening of Israeli society, of the kinds of leaders that they choose, and the kinds of policies that they have to indoctrinate. And if at the end of it all, they could pass a bill like the nation-state bill, that in explicit terms says that Israel is for no one
I can't. And that's why I'm signed on 6 appeals to the Supreme Court against the nation-state law. I think the nation-state law, if it stays in Israel, it is probably the end of the democratic nature of the State of Israel. It will probably start when trickling down, when it starts being broken to smaller pieces of legislation on the municipal level and in the workplaces. This is going to be destructive of the democratic nature of Israel, which will make the nature of civic society that I'm trying to work towards shrink further and further and further and further. This is the enemy. You know, this kind of politicization in the ethnicization of the state of Israel, this is the enemy of the process that we're trying to talk about. There are two main conflicting concepts of the state of Israel. Either the ethnocentric process that leads to the nation-state law, that is led by the extreme right wing with the support of some of the opportunists, politicians in the center right, including, unfortunately, our prime minister, who I put him as one of those opportunists that try to feed out of this process. But it's clear that this is the process I'm against. To tell you that I'm sure that we're going to win, no. But I know, for example, today, that the high-tech industry is dying to get more intellectual power in the industry. And where is the untapped intellectual capacity in Israel? It's in two places. The Haredi ultra-religious community that refuses to even study mathematics. So that's a lost case. And the rest is the Arab community. So the business leaders in the high-tech industry, suddenly, out of self-interest, they want to see growth in the Arab community in high-tech. So they provide more scholarships for Arab students to study engineering at the Technion and at Tel Aviv University. So if you go to the Technion today, you find that 30% of the new Technion is our version of MIT. 30% of the students accepted for the first year in the Technion are Arab. It's the exact opposite of the nation-state law. The Technion is now just completed plans to build a mosque in the Technion because the mass of Muslim Arab students has become such a big mass that the Technion is building a mosque for them, a prayer place that they call it a mosque, not just a prayer room. It is the exact opposite. There's no coexistence between these two concepts. The nation-state law has to go. Now, how do you get rid of the basic law in Israel? You need 80 seats in the Knesset, 2/3 of the parliament. Can we get it today? No. The alternative way is to go to the Supreme Court. And there are 56 appeals. As I said, I'm signed on 6 of them. That one appeal says it negates the Declaration of Independence, which does have the clause that speaks about social, economic, but mostly political equality. So it calls it, it negates the Declaration of Independence. The second appeal says it negates the basic laws that were passed in 1950s and 1960s in Israel that guarantee human dignity, guarantee human rights, guarantees equality, guarantees freedom of movement, freedom of expression, all the, what we call the package that created the democratic nature of the State of Israel. This law negates the Israeli other laws. Another appeal says it negates the surrender agreements of all Arab towns and villages. Article 9 in surrender agreements says that the Israeli military, represented by Chaim Laskov, the deputy chief of the staff in Israel, who signed on behalf of the Israeli government, guarantees that in exchange of surrendering arms, the State of Israel will guarantee complete social, economic, and political rights in an equal democracy. There's an agreement, there's a contract between my grandfather and the State of Israel. This law negates that contract. So we do feel there's a chance to win at least one of those appeals. As I said, there are many, many others. But even if we lose it, there's another chance. If the joint list does join a coalition or provides it a safety net, we can pass another law. It's one of the 32 articles there. We call it the equality law. The equality law, which will contradict the nation-state law, which will basically diffuse the impact of the nation-state law, will make it unconstitutional, which will bring it to the Supreme Court, which will have to rule and deal with it. Or we will create a conflictual situation between two nation-state laws that the Knesset will have to find a way how to deal with it. So it doesn't mean that, I describe what I work, and as the lady said, it gives you hope. For me, it doesn't give me hope. It gives me a clear roadmap of how to do it. I don't believe in peace. I believe in pieces of peace. And I sleep well because at the end of the day, I know 300 kids came to my campus, and I broke the stereotypes in the mind of 300 kids. Did I touch the 8 million Israelis, sir? No. No. I can't carry the burden as a small NGO of the 8 million Israelis. I can try 300 any day. That's my capacity as a civil society organization. I can outsmart the system and do the cross-sector teachers program. It's only 1,350 schools out of 4,750. Is that enough? No. Is one teacher enough? No. I would like to have 2 teachers in every school. Multiply by 4,750, we need about 10,000 teachers. I'm at 13% capacity. I'm not at 100% capacity. Ask me this question when I'm at 100% capacity, then I'll tell you I can win the battle. Between now and then, join me. I need one more hand.
Yeah. So I actually am a couple things. I kind of feel like on that note, that really is, and I failed to do this at the beginning. First of all, for those Jews that are here, it's really important that you open yourself up, maybe to hear a perspective that you've never heard before. And this would not be as meaningful as I think it has been tonight if it weren't for our Muslim and Christian brothers and sisters that are here with us to hear this together. So for the community that you've created tonight, you should know how important it is that you show up. Yeah. No, that's okay.
My name is Abe Wagan. Salam, peace.
Shalom.
It's all about, I'm involved with the Holocaust Association, who's a jump for the Marcus Spirit. We have a lot of stuff, we sponsor a lot of stuff together. There's nobody here that wants safety for Jewish people more than me, because I lost tons of family and friends. However, I'm 100% with you, and I want to ask, how can American Jewry, the people you are meeting here, help and support Givat Habiba in their continued work getting pieces of peace, which will build to bigger pieces? Peace.
That's a big fat one across the plate.
You told me not to speak about fundraising, right? No, we'll discuss that. But meanwhile, before that, I'm in a place that feels that the cross-border conflict is at a freeze situation, and probably will stay in a similar situation as it has been for the last 15 years, for at least another 15 years. I'm not that optimistic on the cross-border issue. And the question is, how do we generate enough power on the ground that tries to create pressure from the bottom up and not wait from the top-down solution? Meanwhile, I refuse to lose a day where we miss the opportunity of having not 300, but maybe we can have 400 kids in our campus every day. One of the projects that I initially recently started in an effort to try to increase the percentage of Arab citizens in the high-tech industry we realized that there are not enough Arab kids that go to study high-tech and engineering. And so how can you blame Israeli high-tech industry for not having Arab employees when they're not studying, when they're not coming with the degrees? So we did an interesting project. We call it High-Tech Seeds. We go look for Arab kids in 8th grade who are very good in mathematics. And in 9th grade, they start taking academic courses in computer science. By the time they finish high school, they have 50% of their undergraduate degree in computer science. All what they need to do is spend an additional 3 to 4 semesters, and at age 19 and a half, they're out in the market for the job. And they're the smartest, best kids that we identified at a very, very, very young age. So you want a way to do it? Help me pay for one of those kids. Each kid costs about $2,000 a year. That's it. To put a kid like that on track, it's $2,000 a year. Now, what's the importance of Arab kids in high-tech? Poverty rate in the Arab community is 47%. Poverty rate in the Jewish community is 13%. Someone who works in high-tech in Israel makes 3 times the average wage. So if you want to help create wealth in the Arab community, you need to bring in high salaries, not just to get jobs in construction with 70% of the average wage. The concept of creating an Arab middle class has become a major concept in our work, where we feel that, when Bjorn introduced me, he called the center a Center for Equality and Shared Society, where we feel empowerment programs towards equality of the Arab citizens are a main component in building a shared society. Now, if you go ask most Jews in Israel, what do you think about the 2 components of shared society, equality and good relations? Most Jews will say, I'm fine with both ideas. Most Arab citizens will also say, I'm fine with both ideas, good relations and equality. But you'll find 2 contradicting dynamics, conditional dynamics between these 2 components. Most Arab citizens will say equality first, and if the Jews behave and treat us as equals, we will reward them with good relations. Most Jews see the exact opposite direction. They say the Arab citizens should be in good relations with us, let them behave, and if they are well interactive with us, we will reward them with equality. Now, we believe these are 2 parallel tracks instead of being 2 opposing tracks. Waiting for the other to come forward, they're not going to come forward. And as an organization, we adopted the concept of capacity building, whether it is helping more Arab women get elected to municipal seats, getting more Arab citizens scholarships for universities, getting more Arabs in high-tech industry. We identify now that the finance industry is also problematic. How do you help an Arab citizen to prepare himself for a job, for an interview to work for the government, for civil service? How do you convince the civil service to open up? We found an interesting situation that civil service were saying, we do not find good and qualified Arabs to work for us. The problem is not on us. At the beginning, they were saying Arabs do not apply. So we said, if you would care advertising in their media and not just in the Hebrew media, this might actually get you applicants. But then they said, those that apply are not good enough. Where do they fail? Not in their CVs. They come with the degrees and everything. They fail in the interviews. So how do you prepare them for the interview? But we found an interesting trick which increased the performance by about 30%. What's the trick? Have an Arab civil servant sit in the board of that interviews that potential employee. Without having to even say a word, just the presence of an Arab civil servant when you come to be interviewed. So it's not only 3 Jews, but 2 Jews and 1 Arab, or those 3 Jews plus 1 more Arab citizen that sits there just as a vase, improves the performance by about 30%. It makes them more comfortable. It makes them feel that they're not the only Arabs going into Jewish territory, but civil service is already open shared space, so their performance increases much better. Now, to your question in better detail. It costs us about $60 to bring a child a day to our campus for their first encounter with a Jew or first encounter with an Arab. They come in bulks of 30, which is a classroom, in order not to get the self-selected kids. So we go for a whole classroom that will get all the political range in that classroom, and adopt 2 classrooms. Make the numbers, 60 kids, 30 Arab, 30 Jewish, multiply by 3 days, $60 a day. That's your mission for tonight.
All right.
Okay? And here I'm saying, you don't have to, none of you has to really think of the big burden. Think in small terms of what can I do for tomorrow that can happen tomorrow? What can I do for one student, one Arab student, to finish 1 year in a high-tech program? It doesn't have to be, either I give now, find $1 million, or I do not do anything. When I started with this cross-sector teachers program, I started with 6 teachers that I didn't know how to raise their salaries. Today, 1,350 teachers, their salaries are paid very well by the Israeli government. We're able to find a way to bypass the system, to get the government to recognize this is a project that is worth supporting. It took us about 5 years to do that. But ultimately, my father used to say that the best way to deal with government is to get it pregnant with the right genes. And get the government pregnant with the right projects. Mainly having the government take responsibility. The biggest social change agent in any society is the government. So we have to work with the government, even if it's the worst government. They are the practical partner for the scaling of our programs. Otherwise, we're a fantastic, nice, small project that works with 50 people, and we can tap ourselves on the shoulder and we say we did nice work. We're not in the business of doing nice work. We're in the business of social change. And the business of social change starts one kid at a time, but you need to create masses.
So, Mohammed, grateful that you gave time to a rabbi from Paradise Valley, Arizona, when I reached out to you in March.
Anytime.
And Bjorn, so grateful that you called, thinking that Temple Solel would be would look forward to the opportunity to host Mohammed and to do so in partnership with NAU and the Martin Springer Institute. And this has been a blessing for all of us, so thank you.
Thank you. I've been waiting for this to take off I've been waiting to take off the tie. I'll give you my card. He gets paid the big bucks on your card.
I have a question, but I didn't want to.
Yes, of
please.
course.
Question, Tony?
I can send it directly to you, a check.
Drop me. We have an office in New York.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
go to our website, you'll find our New York office. It's
Yeah.
tax-free also.
It was a
Be
different
careful with
class
this
here
stuff.
tonight.
Oh, yeah, well, we actually made an announcement at the beginning that some people, so you may have come after that. Yeah, okay, well.
Muslim countries are there, even if you think Turkey is a
One, two,
I was a few minutes late, but the purpose
approximate population.
about a billion Muslims.
Rabbi, I don't know who you are.
Yeah, hi, Rabbi John Linder. I am an ordained rabbi, yeah.
Israel was started because the world,
And you know what? I don't care. My country is Israel.
all the Jews that were there.
Yeah, I'm just wondering why
That's the reason that there's Israel. When there was in 1976,
28
one
countries have the same nation
his
state.
brother died.
Israel sees
Rescuing
itself as part of the
96 Jews that were
Enlightenment
separated on
Western
that
world.
flight. It was only
And
Israel.
I judge Israel by its
Shocked the
angles.
world. It
There
is a
are those
wonderful
that
thought
Israel passed
that these things
that
happen. The
constitute the
reality of
democratic
it is,
nature.
what does his organization do when
I
those
judge
3
Israel
boys
by
were
its
killed
promise
and murdered?
in the Declaration of
Palestinians laugh
Independence.
and cry and clap.
I judge Israel by
What does his
Yeah.
organization do?
You're
By
welcome
the
to ask him.
spirit
I don't see
of the Supreme Court of the state.
organization
I'm not trying to import any outside
condemning them.
values.
I don't hear their voices.
Okay. Well, so yeah, I'm not the apologist for other organizations, so hopefully you were able to learn a little bit tonight. And if not,
It's a good idea, but there's another side to it. There's a reason why there is a
right,
not only from the Helsinki Accords, but from
It was founded
the beginning.
as a different society.
tell Rabbi Alush that you met Rabbi Linder, and because you've got a great rabbi.
I just spoke on
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I'm a very big fan.
But this was decided not to be part of that club.
Very honored, but I didn't hear actually. But I mean, it's a great idea, but I think
Good to see you.
Come visit us one day. You might call it. Come visit us.
Yeah. Well, it's yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, no, it's certainly not enough. I mean, it's the work of it's the work of Azra Hussein and the Islamic Speakers Bureau of Arizona. So, yeah. Good, how you doing?
my question.
Azra, you want to take a really.
Rejoice in the state of people on Shabbat. What does your organization do to let them know that what message they are sending to the Jewish people in Israel that turns them off to your philosophy? Not because they don't want peace, because I'm on both sides. I have a lot of family in Israel, Orthodox and non-Orthodox. But what does your
We denounce those actions. If you go to our website, it's full of
Yeah, again, I don't know if the rabbi doesn't know how to get to his own website.
women and children?
not just women, children, anyone who's not involved in the conflict, anyone who's civilians, it turns more people to the extreme
How
in both
loud is your voice when you do that? I think that's
as
a
loud
very...
as
Right,
loud as it
and I'm
gets.
going to just there's other people.
That was my question. That was one of my
As loud
questions.
as we
I
can.
don't hear as loud of a voice.
Well, now you know another organization that you can
Follow us on our website.
Go on their website. You'll learn
Follow
more.
our Facebook page, and you'll be able to find it.
Take a card too.
Of course, Mrs. Coyle.
That's right. It's really, it was coded to change it to oil.
Oil.
But, so I was going to ask about hiring the people parents.
It depends which companies. Some companies that came out of the military industry, they're still closed. They have lobbies going out to policies. Others that came from more civilian background, people that came from civilian background, they have less of issues. We found, one of the projects I initiated a while ago was called Galil Software. We created the company because many Israeli software companies were not accepting Arab citizens. And we said, okay, let's create a way out for them. We started competing for jobs that we're sending to India and China. Create a company with 6 Arab engineers, top of the class in the Technion, great brains. And we said, give us the jobs. Don't give us the jobs of other Israelis, give us the jobs of what you send to China and India. And we succeeded with this project. In the beginning, we were doing it for 50% of the salaries in Israel, equivalent to what they would pay in China and India. The company has grown today to almost 160 employees, and it's a non-for-profit corporation. And so all the money that we make, we invest back in the company and in the employees. But the great success of the company is not that. The great success is that we lose almost 1/3 of our employees every year to the mother companies. That they work with them for 1 or 2 years, they realize that there's no problem really, and that the problem there are misconceptions that we're blocking the integration of these other employees. And after working with them, experimenting them for a couple of years, they say, okay, now come to Tel Aviv, we'll take you in. 1/3 of our employees will use it. Love that. an email, WhatsApp. I'll be more than happy to cooperate with you.
Leaving tomorrow?
Yeah, tonight actually, 12:30 tonight. At 12:30 flight. I have 4 meetings in New York with donors, and then 11 p.m. flight from New York. So I'm not going to sleep for 2 nights. Thank you very much. Great pleasure. Yes, we met you. Thank you. Great
So
pleasure.
I have a question I'm just thinking about. It's a simple one, but just curious. So with the increase of Arab students at universities, when they're on campus, do they tend to be housed with themselves, or are they actually housing with Israeli students?
They do tend to congregate with themselves in the first year. But once they move on in the second year, they start expanding their system. And towards the third year, it's almost you can't tell. The dress code even changes. If you see my daughter, she's doing her master's, you see her from a distance or even from close proximity. You wouldn't be able to tell. Even if you talk to her in Hebrew, you won't be able to tell what she did. It does, they go through this rehabilitation process or habitation process that they start going to the same movies, eating in the same diners, and slowly behaving like the herd. The first year, they do congregate among themselves, mostly because of fear of integration, fear of crossing the comfort zone. Mostly enjoying the same music for this and the same smell of the food. Slowly you start developing flavor for simple food that is...
So we've got a photo.
Yeah, let me put... Great pleasure. Thank you.
You didn't talk about art to art.
Yeah, actually, come over
Not
up
yet.
here.
Next time.
And have a backdrop. Let's just do it right here.
I guess he wants a picture with all of us with you.
Okay.
Thank you very much for all your work.
Like,
No, you shouldn't have.
yeah?
Look, we don't care.
That's fine. No, that's cool. Mention the inviting her for work.
Oh, that's okay. Just not that serious. But if you want to sit in Arabic, you can buy it. He's the music guy. Yeah, guys are on the boss.
You are listening. Okay, here we go. Here we go. We've got there's the photographer.
You want to come?
I don't want to be in the front, guys. Can I?
Oh, come on, Azra. Go ahead. Bjorn, are you in here? Oh, all right, here we go. Perfect.
Again, say hummus.
Do a couple. One more, all right. Perfect, thank you. Wait. My phone. All right, let's go. Perfect. Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you very much. We went to college together.
Overlap 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen you.
You look good. You look fit. She would never
Right now.
Yes, she is.
With their bank card. She's got her passport. Anyway, the choice: bigger kids, bigger problems.
You get a new phone.
ثقافة وموسيقى في العراق في الجزائر في تونس وسافرت كثير في الشرق الأوسط في مصر والخليج
هو ممتاز
ممتاز
ممتاز. في عندنا برنامج تعليم عربي تبع خليفة عربي في فلسطيني. إذا معني تيجي تعمل دورة عنا كم شهر. أهلا وسهلا فيك. جرب أهلا وسهلا.
We're having dinner next week. Okay. Thanks for coming to speak. Enjoyed hearing your perspective. Really, yeah. Excellent. So much.
And maybe the sound that is required to make every show. Maybe
Yeah, I'm not sure how you experience it.
Very good questions.
So Rich Casper, Jewish Federation, the Jewish Community Foundation.
I have an expanding empire, but
Tomorrow I have a meeting at 11 with the New York Jewish Federation about the renewal of their grant. Last year they gave us a grant of $50,000.
Oh, really?
This year we're looking for 2020 for 25,000.
So the Jewish Community Foundation, which I originally was the CEO, not only about organizations in the world.
Right.
That would be on your list.
We don't have that level of money to give away.
I know it's only
But we do
it's
some.
the fifth biggest
Right.
The fifth
The good news is that two other people who work in our foundation who run grant-making programs were here today. Yeah. And they were listening. Excellent. But I'll make sure they have their information. Yeah, of course. Good.
practical way of doing it.
Yeah, of course. That's what makes the world go round.
We always want to find good stuff.
Next time you're in Israel also, we don't only talk about hummus, I know how to make it. And at least coffee.
Okay, good.
All about the Turkish coffee.
I think I saw that film about the competition with the Israeli and the
Yes. Yes. Actually, the one that there are three debates about
Or
this.
Jewish.
There are three debates. The debate inside Israel, who has the best hummus.
Okay.
And the best hummus seems to be happening in Israel. Either in the village called Abu Ghosh, which is going towards Israel, or in Nazareth, which is the culinary capital of the Arab Israel. That's where you get what is called fusion Arab food. Amazing chefs. Every chef, you can spend a year in Nazareth going to small restaurants, fascinating chefs. So there's debate within the Arab community, where's the better hummus? And there's debate between the Arab and the Jewish community, who makes better hummus? And then there's debate between the Arab hummus makers, that's like a cross-border debate. Is it Palestinian or is it Lebanese?
That's right. Somewhere we have
Right. Also, Saturday Halloween baking competition.
Except it also sounds to me it's very Middle Eastern. Like, you know, dividing it up into, rivalries smaller and smaller. And more and more American, unfortunately. Anyway. Yeah, oh, yeah. So there's innovation and competition.
That's it. They have the last
None of us knew this was developing, right?
But what's also developing mainly a lot of the Turkish experiences and a lot of the Syrian experience. Because many Syrians have to Jordan as a result of the war, and they brought that experience, and we interact with them and bring a lot of the recipes and upgrade them and modernize them. Yeah, I know. It will be tasty.
I know, that's what I thought. It's so nice. It's fine. Was he right? Jason Alexander.
That is a full-time job. Yes. And it's 6 years. So I was a lawyer in private practice. Yeah. Exactly.
I'm looking for my card. I get you.
You send it to
I
me.
give it.
If it's available,
Okay, sounds good.
do you want further contact? You send me.
All right. You know what you're sure. Really? Wow, that is not a church itself. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought so too.
I was in 2000. I co-founded the movement called One Voice Movement. And the One Voice Movement assumed that there is a majority of Palestinians and majority of Israelis who support the peace agreement, and that their voices are not heard. It was right after the collapse of the peace negotiations.
I do not. But yeah.
The idea was to try to get people to sign this two-state solution, but the leaderships were saying it's fair. We got 475,000 signatures. It's going to start Jewish Israelis and half Palestinians from the West Bank and Gaza. Then we got what's her name? She was also a short woman and her husband.
Oh, what's his name?
Danny DeVito and his wife.
Oh, all right.
Ex-husband. Yeah.
And
Real
they heard about this,
Oh.
so they invited us to their home to speak about this project.
Oh.
And George was there. What's his name?
Jason.
Jason.
Alexander.
Jason was there.
Yeah.
What's her name?
Nice to see you.
Jennifer Levinson.
Aniston.
Aniston was there.
Oh, she was
And
there.
Jennifer, I don't know who she was. Goodness, I had no idea who she was. I go there and this woman has a broken toe with a cast. And I said, hello, Mohammed and Jennifer. Okay. He said, oh, sorry for your cast. What's it? Broken toe. I said, if I was you, I would go home. Why are you here? She said, I went to hear the speaker. I said, I'm the speaker.
Was that this trip or a previous trip?
No, this was like 2001, 2002. It's like, oh. She was still married to Brad Pitt.
Hey, right, okay, that was it.
Who was also
That was
there.
a long time ago.
And this guy.
Ken Burns?
No. Yeah, the new movie, Brooklyn.
I've heard of the movie, but I don't know the movie.
He directed it and he produced it and he played it.
I don't know him, but I heard it's a good movie.
It's a good movie.
You recommend it? Oh.
I haven't seen
Oh.
it, but it's.
You did pretty well.
also 30-something, but he's a director and producer. His sister would also work. She's also an artist.
Google, who's the director? I know. But Google gets better and better because you don't kind of dance around the subject and it still finds me. Well, we should, it sounds like he's somebody we should know.
I guess so.
Oh, Ed
Well,
Norton,
I'll
of
say that
course.
Ken thing is kind of threw us off.
Oh, he's an amazing actor. Oh my gosh. Yeah, if he's in it, I mean, that's enough of a
Yeah. Well, this has been lovely, but I'm exhausted. Me too. Okay, good to see you.
pleasure. Really great to hear.
Very nice to meet
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
Great pleasure. Thank you for coming.
You can take another cup and jam some brownies in there.